Hello, my name is Andy Feaster, and I'm a principal with Development Strategies. Our project manager, Richa Singh, and I want to talk about housing needs in Greeley as part of the At Home in Greeley project. We will first describe several key findings that impact housing in Greeley, and then we will summarize the community's housing needs over the next several years. A couple of key highlights before we begin. First, Greeley needs all types of housing at all price points across all of the city. Also, the rapid home price increase over the past decade has put extra burden on many longtime residents, particularly those with lower and more moderate incomes. Finally, Greeley has the potential to grow considerably over the next decade, but it needs a greater diversity of housing types and price points and more housing units to support that growth. First, we want to talk about several key trends. As part of the study, we had several stakeholder and community conversations as well as a community survey about housing needs. We heard these five key themes. Housing in Greeley has become scarce. There's a need for missing middle housing and homes that sell for less than $400,000. We heard that some of the accessible and affordable housing is not located near the essential services and amenities and jobs that people need. Housing options are especially limited for many of the vulnerable communities in Greeley, which includes seniors, some Spanish speakers, people with disabilities or mental health challenges, and those experiencing homelessness. We also heard that there's interest in diversifying housing types in Greeley. People want to see more variety, townhomes, duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, condos, accessory dwelling units. And finally, we heard that the limited availability of housing is creating challenges for employers and workers as people look to recruit more workers to Greeley and workers look to find housing to take some of those jobs. Zooming out, we like to look at the national context. What is happening in housing across the country that might impact local communities like Greeley? We've heard a lot of news, and the data supports it, that housing costs, the cost to build housing units, has increased substantially over the last couple of decades. That has fueled in part rising prices. Prices have increased by 60% in 2 decades after adjusting for inflation. And a major problem has been we have an inventory shortage. We haven't produced enough housing units, particularly over the past decade, to keep up with the need. Zooming closer to Greeley, Weld County is growing, and Greeley's capturing a large share of that growth. The household makeup of Greeley is changing. There's a lot of the early workforce, or those aged 25 to 34, moving to the community, creating a lot of competition for moderately priced housing units. And then there's been out-of-state investors buying apartment properties and single-family rentals, and we'll talk about those impacts a little bit later. Now, Rich is going to talk through some of the key findings from the demographic and economic analysis.
Thank you, Andy. These are the key themes that we identified during the course of this assessment. The housing market in Greeley is very competitive. Greeley's population is changing, and there is a population loss projected in certain age cohorts, which may be impacted by the lack of right housing products in the city. Many residents in the city struggle to make housing payments and are cost burdened. There are impacts from large share of units being owned by out-of-state owners. And finally, the northeast quadrant of the city presents the greatest needs, but also the greatest opportunities for reinvestment and can be used to prioritize affordable and equitable housing solutions. Elaborating on the first theme, Greeley's housing market is tight, with just a month's worth of supply or 120 units of single-family homes. 6 months is considered a healthy supply to create a balance in the market while ensuring some competition for individual units. So the city currently needs approximately 600 more homes to create that balanced market. Greeley used to be a best-kept secret for finding affordable housing in the region, but that is not the case anymore. We see that existing home prices have nearly tripled in Greeley over the past decade. Rents for multifamily units are also rising rapidly, while vacancy rates are at historic lows. It is projected that early workforce, population aged between 25 and 34 years of age, and empty nesters, population aged between 50 and 64 years of age, These two cohorts in the city will decline in the next 5 years. This is the challenge seen in many high growth communities where households are unable to afford housing in the city. Additionally, the rapidly increasing population of elderly will increase the need for remodeling or rehab of existing homes, aging in place, needs for more services, and needs arising from limited mobility. Data shows that nearly 37% of all households in the city are paying more than 30% of their income towards housing costs, making them cost burdened. It is even more challenging for renter households, more than half of which are cost burdened. We can see here that nearly 85% of all households in the city today cannot afford the current median sale price of a new home in the city. And this challenge is also seen on the renter side, where households currently need to make a housing wage of $32 an hour to be able to afford the current market rate of $1,500 for a two-bedroom, safe and decent apartment in the city. When discussing affordability, we also want to look at the growing jobs in the region and how much they pay. We can see here that a food service worker, a teacher, or a construction worker in the city working in the city and making the median salary is unable to afford the median rents in the region. We also want to look at affordability through the lens of equity. And we see this pattern in most communities we work in, where historically marginalized communities are unable to afford average housing rents and prices. This is the challenge that impacts our communities, and we want to be able to talk about it and address it. More than 40% of apartment properties in Greeley are owned by out-of-state companies. While many are reputable and maintain their properties well, others are driven in part by a motivation to maximize financial returns over properly maintaining a unit. Many investors want to maximize operating efficiency, so they may increase rents or stop accepting Section 8 housing vouchers. These are all trends that impact affordability and may lead to decreasing supply of naturally occurring affordable housing in the city. While the northeast quadrant of the city is diverse with a high population density, it faces many challenges such as lower home values than other parts of the city and relatively high share of vacant housing units. The Hispanic community is disproportionately impacted by these challenges. These neighborhoods represent a high need for the city, but also offer potential for reinvestment in housing that meets community needs. The sub-area plan, which is another part of this project that is going on concurrently with the housing needs assessment, focuses on identifying unique housing opportunities in the 10th Street corridor of the city between 23rd and 30th Avenues. This plan will illustrate how different types of housing could be designed to fit within the neighborhood, with a priority to focus on affordable housing types first. We encourage you to join us for the second workshop for the sub-area plan. More details on that workshop are shared at the end of this video.
Thank you, Richa. I quickly want to review how Greeley measures up to some peer and competitive cities. When we look at housing prices, median sales prices over the last 3 months, Greeley, while the price is much higher than 10 years ago, is still relatively affordable compared to these other cities. We also look at home value to income ratio, and a lower number is generally better and more attainable for households. And Greeley is also at the lower end. It doesn't mean there's still challenges, but compared to its peers, Greeley is still relatively affordable, which is part of why a lot of people are moving to the city. When we compare Greeley to the other cities in terms of rent, there's a similar trend in terms of where the median rent falls. However, when we compare people's income spent on rent, Greeley skews toward the higher end, particularly when you don't look at Boulder. So people are struggling to adjust to the increases in rent that have happened. Now I want to shift to the demand analysis and needs analysis. And we're really looking to answer the question, what is the need? And we start this process by considering what is the affordability in these different income groups. And we look at, very low income all the way up to high income categories. And this graph compares Weld County to Greeley, and at the bottom lists those affordability levels, assuming that households would not be cost burdened in the future. and kind of that maximum affordability level for sale and for rent. And to translate this into kind of what it looks like for normal households, for your neighbors in the community, and we created a few household examples. Single household, full-time worker with part-time worker, two-income households that kind of bridge this middle income range in Greeley. And if you look at family a full-time service worker with part-time daycare worker earning about $54,000 a year, to have housing and not be cost burdened, there are very few options in Greeley at their affordable price ranges. And even if you look at what we consider a high income household, just based on their household income of $108,000 in family D, they have limited options still in terms of finding an attainable home, particularly new construction in the city. We also looked at dedicated affordable housing, which is those programs like low-income housing tax credits, Section 8 housing or housing choice vouchers that provide housing that is affordable where the unit can't just be sold and rent increased. And there's a lot of households, almost 16,000 households who qualify at that for affordable housing at that 60% of AMI level, and there's only about 2,800 units that are dedicated affordable housing. So a lot of households are trying to find that attainable and affordable housing on the open market. And because of market pressures today, that's becoming more challenging. And we know that a lot of people are moving to Weld County and to Greeley. And this migration patterns really support that. More people are moving to the county than are leaving. And so in the period of 2016 to 2021, more than 10,000 households moved from other counties in Colorado to Weld County, and this trend is projected to continue, which will continue to drive demand for housing. And so honing in a little bit further, we projected demand over the next 20 years, and we started by looking at growth rates. And we looked at a couple different scenarios in a range because when you're projecting over a long period of time, it's really hard to be exact. So we compared kind of the historic growth of 1.5% each year in Greeley to a higher growth rate if Greeley's able to have the right housing stock and have captured a greater share of Weld County growth, which is certainly possible. And the growth alone would bring 14,000 to 20,000 new households to Greeley over the next 20 years, which has a lot of implications for housing. We then use this to look at demand at those different income categories we talked about a few minutes ago, to look at what's needed in each income category to understand where kind of housing efforts need to be focused. And this goes back to Greeley needs all types of housing at all price points across the city. There's still a need for high income market rate housing. That's a really important part of the ecosystem, and providing enough of that housing does open up existing and moderately priced options in the market. With that, I want to conclude with where we started. This information shows that Greeley needs all types of housing at all price points across all parts of the city. It shows that the rapid increases in home prices have really created challenges for many long-term residents, including those with moderate and lower incomes. And also, Greeley has the potential to continue to grow considerably, and it needs a broader diversity of housing to support that growth in a more equitable way. Our next steps for the project are to wrap up this report, which will be publicly available later this summer. We're also continuing to work on the area plan, and there will be a public workshop, as Richa mentioned, on Thursday, June 8th at 5:30 at the Greeley Recreation Center. We'd love to hear your ideas and feedback about some development potentials in the 10th Street corridor. And finally, please visit the website for further updates. It's listed here. Thank you.